On a snowy Christmas Eve, a wealthy woman walked past a shivering little girl in the cold, pretending she didn't see. But what she didn't know was that fate was watching, and the price of her indifference would change her life forever. To know the full story, watch till the end, and if you like the video, then like, share, and subscribe. Snowflakes fell silently over the glittering streets, every shop window glowing with golden lights and cheerful carols spilling into the night. It was Christmas Eve, and the world seemed wrapped in joy and abundance. But not for everyone. On the corner of an upscale street, huddled in a thin jacket 2 sizes too small, sat a little black girl. Her hands were red from the cold, her lips trembling as she tried to rub warmth back into her body. People passed by with shopping bags and laughter, their arms full of gifts, their hearts light with celebration. And then came her. A tall, elegant woman stepped out of a sleek black car. Diamonds glittered on her wrist, and her fur coat swayed as though the icy wind dared not touch her. This was Victoria Hale, wealthy, powerful, and feared in her circles. A woman who lived for appearances, whose heart had long ago frozen over. Like the snow beneath her stilettos, she saw the girl. Their eyes met for a brief, haunting moment. The child's gaze was not begging. It was simply tired, quietly desperate, a silent plea that cut deeper than words. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked away. Her best friend and confidant, Margaret, a white woman just as wealthy, leaned closer and whispered with a smirk, "Don't stare, Victoria. If you give attention to one, 10 more will follow. That's how it starts." Victoria nodded coldly, brushing past the girl as if she didn't exist. She tightened, her grip on her designer purse, her heels clicking like a drumbeat of indifference. The girl's shiver became a tremor. She pulled her knees closer to her chest, whispering something under her breath that no one stopped to hear. For a moment, Victoria felt a strange tug, an unwelcome warmth in the chest she thought had long closed off to the world. But she silenced it with a single thought. Not my problem. The snow fell heavier. The streets grew quieter as families retreated into warmth and celebration. Yet the girl remained, a fragile figure swallowed by the night. What Victoria didn't know, what fate had prepared, was that this brief encounter, this single choice to ignore a suffering child, would return to her in ways she could never imagine. Her reputation, her wealth, even her very sense of self, all of it was about to be tested. And on this Christmas Eve, the coldest heart in the city would be forced to confront a truth that no amount of diamonds or denial could silence. Because, sometimes, the gift you refuse to give becomes the lesson you can't escape. The storm grew harsher as the night deepened. Snow piled up on the edges of the cobblestone sidewalks, muffling footsteps and swallowing the sounds of the city. Warm, golden lights twinkled in windows, families gathering around trees, laughter echoing in living rooms. Inside one of those glowing mansions stood Victoria Hale, tall and striking in her emerald silk gown. She poured herself a glass of vintage wine as her best friend Margaret Stanton lounged on a velvet sofa, her heels kicked off, a sly smile painted across her lips. Victoria's mansion was more than just a home. It was a monument to her success. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, art worth millions lined the walls, and every piece of furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. It was a palace of excess, but also of emptiness. "Darling," Margaret drawled, swirling her glass of champagne, "I saw that look in your eyes earlier. Don't tell me you actually felt something for that little street rat." Victoria exhaled sharply, trying to appear unaffected. She set her glass down on the marble counter, its sharp click echoing through the quiet. "Don't be ridiculous. She was just staring at me, that's all." Margaret chuckled. "Oh, they all stare. They see money dripping off us like honey, and they think we'll let them taste it. But we're not fools, are we?" Victoria forced a small smirk. though inside a shadow of unease lingered. The girl's trembling lips, her tiny body shrinking into the cold. Why had it stuck in her mind? Normally, Victoria's heart didn't linger on the poor. Charity was for cameras and press releases, not for real life. She distracted herself by checking her reflection in a gilded mirror. Not a single hair out of place. Flawless makeup. She was a woman who never cracked, never stumbled, never gave the world a reason to doubt her power. But power had a price. For years, Victoria had clawed her way through the male-dominated empire of finance, facing whispers behind closed doors and doors slammed in her face. Her wealth wasn't just a trophy, it was her armor. To show softness was to invite attack, and she had sworn never to be weak again. Besides, she muttered, half to Margaret, half to herself, I can't save everyone. The world doesn't work like that. Margaret smirked knowingly. Exactly. You give one of them your coat. Tomorrow there are 10 more waiting at your door, and then? They'll drag you down into their misery. The words hardened Victoria's face. Yes, that was the truth. Mercy was weakness, and weakness had no place in her kingdom. Meanwhile, out on the frozen streets, the little black girl pressed herself deeper into the doorway of a closed shop. Her name was Amara. She was only 11, but tonight she felt closer to 50. Hunger gnawed at her belly, sharper than the wind clawing through her coat. She held a crumpled plastic bag to her chest, her only belonging, a bag with 2 broken crayons, a tattered teddy bear missing an eye, and a letter she'd never sent. The world celebrated Christmas with feasts and gifts, but for Amara, survival itself was the gift she prayed for. She remembered the flash of the rich woman's eyes, cold, dismissing her like she wasn't human. Amara whispered into the snow, her voice cracked and soft. God, please don't let me die tonight. Back in the mansion, Margaret pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos from the gala they had attended earlier. You know, the board will eat up these shots. 2 queens of the city dripping with elegance. That's the brand we sell, Victoria. Victoria smirked, but her gaze drifted toward the frosted window. Outside, the snow still fell, relentless and unyielding. Somewhere out there, that child was still sitting in the cold. A flicker of doubt pierced her chest again. She masked it quickly, brushing it off like lint from her gown. Margaret leaned forward, her tone shifting slightly. Don't let yourself get distracted, Vic. Compassion. It's not for people like us. You worked too hard to build this empire. You can't let a little beggar unravel it. Victoria nodded slowly, her jaw tightening. She wanted to believe. Those words, needed to believe them. But in the deepest corner of her heart, buried under layers of wealth, pride, and scars, something unsettled was stirring. The night stretched on. The clock ticked toward midnight, the hour when Christmas. Bells would ring and families would exchange gifts by the fire. Victoria prepared to host her annual Christmas gala, an event that showcased her power to the entire city. Politicians, investors, and celebrities would all gather under her roof. To them, she was perfection. But fate, as always, had its own plans. Outside her mansion gates, unseen and unheard, Amara's frail body trembled harder. Her breath came in short, shallow puffs, each one fading faster into the air. And though Victoria didn't yet know it, the girl she had ignored was about to walk straight back into her life, not as a forgotten shadow, but as the spark that would ignite a fire Victoria couldn't control. Because sometimes, the moments you dismiss are the ones destiny uses to break you wide open. And this Christmas Eve, Victoria Hale was about to learn that truth in the most unforgettable way. The snow outside thickened into a curtain of white, swallowing the streets and cloaking the world in silence. Inside Victoria Hale's mansion, however, the music swelled. The Christmas gala had begun. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter rippled across the grand hall, and the chandelier's light danced on gowns worth more than most families made in a year. Every corner glowed with excess. Trays of caviar, towers of champagne, carolers singing by the piano. Victoria floated through the crowd like a queen surveying her kingdom. Smiles greeted her from every direction, businessmen eager to strike. Deals, politicians desperate for donations, socialites hungry for her approval. She had everything she thought she wanted: power, wealth, and recognition. Yet beneath the surface, unease still tugged at her. Her best friend Margaret never left her side. "Darling," she whispered, as they moved through the crowd. "You have senators eating out of your hand. Tonight is proof you've arrived." Victoria forced a smile, raising her glass in thanks as yet another guest complimented her empire. But her eyes strayed, almost involuntarily, toward the frosted windows. Somewhere beyond those glass panes, she imagined the little black girl still huddled in the cold. She pushed the thought down. Tonight wasn't about weakness. Tonight was about power. Meanwhile, on the other side of the gate, Amara shivered harder. Her tiny body curled tighter in the snowbank, her thin coat offering no warmth. She could hear faint echoes of laughter and music drifting from the mansion. To her, it sounded like another world, one where she didn't belong. Her lips quivered as she whispered to herself, "Don't cry. Don't let them see you cry." A guard walked past the iron gate, glancing at her with disdain. "Move along, kid," he barked. "You don't belong here." Amara's stomach growled so loudly it hurt. She pressed her little hand to it, blinking back tears, but she didn't move. Something in her heart, something stubborn, told her not to leave. Maybe it was foolishness. Maybe it was hope. Inside, Margaret was still talking, her voice low and sharp. "Do you see them?" she whispered, gesturing discreetly toward a cluster of investors. "They're here because they trust you, because they believe you're above the rest. Don't forget that." Victoria nodded, but her focus slipped as she noticed a commotion at the window. Two guests were murmuring, pointing outside. Victoria's breath caught. Through the glass, she saw her. Amara. Still there, still shivering. Her little body huddled against the gate like a broken doll. One of the guests scoffed. "Look at that. Even on Christmas they come crawling. Can't they keep their kind in their own neighborhoods?" The words struck Victoria like a slap. She glanced at Margaret, expecting even a flicker of discomfort. Instead, Margaret smirked. "Pathetic, isn't it? Always begging, always wanting. They think the world owes them something." Victoria's chest tightened. She wanted to say something, to tell them to stop. But the eyes of the room were on her, and in this circle, showing compassion was the ultimate weakness. She swallowed hard and turned away. But guilt burned inside her. Amara's small body could take no more. She slumped against the gate, eyes fluttering. The cold was pulling her under. A waiter stepped outside to dump trash and noticed her. "Hey!" he shouted, waving her off like an animal. "You can't stay here. Move before I call the police." Amara tried to stand, but her legs gave out. She collapsed back into the snow, her breath shallow. The waiter sneered. "Figures. Another one of them making trouble." He turned back inside, muttering under his breath. But fate had other plans. The crash came suddenly, one of the champagne towers tipping, glass shattering across the marble floor. Guests gasped, servants scrambled, and in the chaos, Victoria slipped away, moving toward the window again. Her eyes locked on the little girl outside. Something inside her broke. She couldn't look away. She couldn't pretend anymore. "Margaret," she whispered, her voice shaking. "She's freezing out there. She'll die." Margaret's face hardened. "And? She's not your responsibility, Victoria. You let her in, and what message does that send? That anyone can walk up to your gates and demand a piece of your life?" Victoria hesitated, her nails digging into her palm. She wanted to believe Margaret. She wanted to keep her armor intact. But the image of Amara's frail body, her lips turning blue, seared into her soul. The choice clawed at her chest like a vice. Then it happened. A sharp cry cut through the night. Amara collapsed completely, her body crumpling into the snow. Victoria's breath stopped. "God," she whispered, the glass slipping from her hand and shattering at her feet. Guests turned, murmuring at her reaction. Margaret gripped her arm tightly. "Don't do this," she hissed. "If you step outside, you'll ruin everything. Your image, your reputation, everything you built." Victoria's pulse thundered in her ears. The room blurred. All she could see was Amara, lying motionless outside her gate. And then, without another thought, Victoria tore her arm free. She ran. The doors burst open as she rushed into the snow, her emerald gown dragging across the icy ground. Gasps followed her, whispers rising like wildfire inside the mansion. Victoria fell to her knees beside Amara. "No, no, no," she murmured, her hands shaking as she lifted the tiny girl into her arms. Amara's skin was like ice. Her lips barely moved. "Stay with me," Victoria pleaded, her voice breaking. "Please, stay with me." The guards looked uncertain, glancing at Margaret for direction. Margaret's face twisted with rage and disbelief. "Victoria!" she shouted from the doorway. "Get back inside, now!" But Victoria didn't move. For the first time in her life, she didn't care about the whispers, the judgment, the consequences. All that mattered was the little girl in her arms. Amara's eyes fluttered open just barely. She whispered one fragile word. "Why?" Victoria's throat tightened. Tears stung her eyes. She didn't have an answer. Not yet. But she knew this. She wasn't going to let Amara die. Not tonight. And for the first time in years, Victoria Hale, untouchable, unbreakable, felt her armor crack. The whispers inside the mansion turned into a storm. She's lost her mind. She's throwing everything away for that? This will ruin her. And through it all, Margaret's voice sliced like a blade. "You're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life." But Victoria no longer listened. Fate had knocked on her door, and she had finally answered. And in that moment, everything began to change. The snowstorm raged harder, as if the world itself was conspiring to bury the night in silence. Victoria cradled Amara tightly in her arms, her emerald gown darkened by melting snow. Each shallow breath from the girl felt like sand slipping through an hourglass. Time was running out. Inside the mansion, panic and outrage brewed like fire. The grand hall no longer hummed with laughter, it seethed with whispers. Guests pressed against the frosted windows, scandal painted across their faces. They had come for prestige, not pity. And at the center of it all stood Margaret, her composure cracking for the first time. Her eyes blazed as she stepped forward, commanding the guards. "Bring her back inside, now!" But the guards hesitated. This wasn't just any guest giving orders. This was Victoria Hale, their employer, their queen. And right now, she was kneeling in the snow, defying everything she had built. Victoria ignored them all. Her only focus was the little girl in her arms. "Stay with me, sweetheart," she whispered desperately. "You're safe now. I won't leave you." Amara's lips trembled, her voice barely audible. "It's cold." Victoria's tears fell freely. I know, but I've got you. You're not alone anymore." She rose, clutching Amara against her chest. With deliberate steps, she carried the child toward the mansion's doors. The crowd parted, shocked into silence as she re-entered the glittering hall, snow dripping from her gown onto the marble floor. The warmth of the grand hall clashed with the icy bundle in Victoria's arms. Gasps rippled across the room. Expensive. Perfumes could not mask the scent of poverty clinging to the child, smoke, dirt, and cold. "Good heavens," one woman muttered, covering her nose with a jeweled handkerchief. "Disgraceful," another man sneered. "What is she doing?" whispered a senator's wife. But Victoria didn't care. She moved toward the grand staircase, calling over her shoulder, "Hot water." "Blankets, now!" Servants scrambled, unsure whether to obey her or Margaret, who was storming after her. "Victoria!" Margaret's voice thundered, echoing across the hall. "What are you doing? Have you lost your mind?" Victoria stopped halfway up the stairs, turning to face her oldest friend. Her eyes glistened with defiance. "I'm saving a life, Margaret." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every guest leaned closer, eager for the scandal to unfold. Margaret laughed coldly. "A life? Look at her. She doesn't belong here. She's not our kind, and by bringing her in, you've just destroyed everything we've worked for." The words cut deep, but Victoria didn't falter. "If everything I've built depends on turning my back on a freezing child, then maybe it deserves to be destroyed." Gasps exploded through the crowd. Margaret's face hardened, her perfect mask fracturing into raw rage. "You're making a fool of yourself," she spat. "Do you think these people will still respect you after this? They'll tear you apart." "They'll say you've gone soft, that you've lost your edge." Victoria's voice cracked, but her resolve held. "Then let them. Because I'd rather lose their respect than lose what's left of my humanity." The tension in the hall thickened. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, while others muttered cruel remarks about charity and weakness. Margaret took a step forward, her voice low and venomous. "You've forgotten who you are. I made you. I brought you into this world of power. Without me, you'd still be a nobody, and now you're throwing it all away. For her." She jabbed a finger toward Amara, who whimpered softly in Victoria's arms. Victoria tightened her hold, her jaw trembling. "You didn't make me, Margaret. You tried to break me. And tonight, you failed." A collective gasp swept the hall. Margaret's face twisted into fury, her mask of elegance shattered. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Every single person in this room will turn against you." "They'll never forgive this weakness." Victoria lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the tears glistening in her eyes. "Then let them, because if compassion is weakness, then I'll wear it proudly." The crowd erupted into chaos, half scandalized, half intrigued. The whispers became shouts, accusations flying. "Charity case. She's lost her mind. She'll ruin us all." Margaret turned on the guests, her voice sharp. "You! See, this is what happens when sentiment infects power. She's no leader. She's a disgrace." The mob surged with agreement, the storm of voices rising higher. The chandelier shook from the vibrations of outrage. Victoria stood firm at the top of the stairs, Amara still clutched in her arms. The child stirred faintly, eyes flickering open. For a brief second, she met Victoria's gaze with a look of fragile trust. It was that look, so small, so innocent, that gave Victoria the strength to face the storm. "I will not abandon her," Victoria declared, her voice echoing like thunder. "Not tonight, not ever. If that means losing all of you, so be it." The room fell silent. For Dee, one suspended heartbeat, even the storm outside seemed to pause. Then came Margaret's final strike. "If you walk this path, Victoria," she snarled, "you walk it alone. Consider this the end of everything we've built together." Victoria's heart pounded, but she didn't look away. Then let it end. And with that, she turned her back on Margaret, and on the entire glittering empire she had created. The hall erupted in chaos behind her, but Victoria no longer heard it. Her only focus was on the small life in her arms, fragile but still alive. She carried Amara up the stairs, step by step, into the unknown. And in that moment, a woman who had once been defined by wealth and pride became something far more powerful. A protector. The party never truly recovered after that night. By morning, newspapers screamed with scandal. Heiress defies society for street child. Christmas chaos at Hale Mansion. Victoria Hale betrays high society ideals. Photographs. of Victoria holding Amara in her arms, snow dripping from her gown, splashed across front pages. The story was everywhere, on breakfast tables, in political circles, whispered in beauty salons. The elite mocked her. Investors threatened to pull out of her businesses. Invitations to exclusive events vanished overnight. For the first time in years, Victoria's name wasn't a symbol of power, it was a warning. But behind the walls of her estate, another story was unfolding. Amara, once frail and forgotten, began to heal. The girl who had been left to freeze in the snow now had warm meals, soft blankets, and, most importantly, someone who looked at her as if she mattered. Victoria stayed at her side through fevers and nightmares, through nights when the girl would wake screaming, afraid she'd be abandoned again. Each time Victoria whispered the same promise. "You're safe now. I'm not leaving." Slowly trust bloomed. Amara began to smile, to laugh, to dream. And with every smile, Victoria felt her own heart mending, piece by piece. Margaret, however, wasn't finished. From the day of the scandal, she launched a quiet war. She spread rumors, orchestrated smear campaigns, and used every contact to poison Victoria's reputation. "She's unstable," Margaret told investors, "ruled by emotions, unfit for leadership." But the more Margaret fought, the more cracks showed in her own mask. Whispers spread about her cruelty, her schemes, and her obsession with control. In trying to bury Victoria, she unearthed her own darkness. By spring, her influence had waned. Her allies abandoned her one by one. She had won the room that night, but lost the war. Meanwhile, Victoria's mansion had changed. The grand halls, once filled only with luxury, now welcomed children from shelters. The kitchens prepared food, not just for guests in gowns, but for the hungry. Rooms that had been locked for years opened their doors to the forgotten. What began as one act of defiance on Christmas Eve grew into something larger, a movement. People who had mocked her in December now began to question themselves. Letters arrived from across the city. "I read about what you did. It made me wonder if I've closed my eyes too long. My daughter saw your photo with that girl. She asked me why we never help people like her. I didn't know what to say. You made me want to be better." The ripple effect had begun. Amara blossomed in this new world. She wasn't just a symbol, she was a child with dreams. She loved painting, her tiny fingers smudged with color. She adored music, her laughter carrying through the halls. On her next Christmas Eve, 1 year after that fateful night, the mansion wasn't filled with dignitaries or investors. It was filled with children. The tree sparkled, not with diamonds, but with paper ornaments crafted by small, eager hands. Amara stood beside Victoria, wearing a red dress too big for her shoulders, her hair adorned with ribbons. She looked up at the towering tree, eyes wide with wonder. "Do you like it?" Victoria asked softly. Amara nodded, her smile radiant. "It feels like home." Victoria's throat tightened. For the first time in years, she realized. So did she. The world outside never fully forgave Victoria Hale for defying its rules. She would never again sit comfortably among the cold elite. But she no longer wanted to. She had traded glittering approval for something far more enduring. A family. A legacy built not on wealth, but on compassion. Her businesses, though battered, survived. Not because of high society, but because ordinary people rallied behind her. Customers chose her stores over others, saying, "She's the woman who saved that little girl." Respect rooted in fear had crumbled. Respect rooted in love had taken its place. Margaret, meanwhile, faded into obscurity. Once the queen of influence, she became a cautionary tale. Her bitterness consumed her, leaving her alone in a mansion where silence echoed louder than applause. The woman who once preached power now tasted the cold reality of isolation. Victoria never gloated. She didn't need to. Fate had already delivered justice. Years later, when Amara was asked to speak at a charity event she and Victoria founded, she told the story in her own words. "I was a child on the street, invisible to the world. I thought, no one would ever see me. But then, someone did. She didn't turn away. She didn't let fear of judgment stop her. She chose kindness. She paused, scanning the crowd with steady eyes. And that choice saved me. But it also changed her. Because when you open your heart to someone else, you don't just save their life, you save your own." The audience rose to their feet, tears in their eyes. Victoria, watching from the front row, smiled through her own tears. The girl she had once carried up those cold stairs was no longer fragile. She was strong, radiant, and unbreakable, and in that moment, Victoria knew. Christmas Eve had given her not a scandal, not a downfall, but a miracle.